light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. I talk about all sorts of life challenges and societal challenges on this show, and I hope that the thoughts that I share provoke your own thinking about very complex and different issues. One that I was asked to address somewhat, and that I guess because of my service dog is close to my heart, the pit bulls and dog fighting and gang-related societal problems and so forth. To me, any sort of violence is actually a display of weakness rather than strength. So when someone says that they have the ability to be violent, they're really just telling you that they're not strong enough to do anything better than that. Violence is the easiest and least helpful and least empowering response that anybody can give to anything. And so it's really kind of a coward's way out to opt for violence instead of working through the difficult complexities of intelligence and mutual respect. Having said that as an opening summary statement, I guess, I happen to live in Colorado, where it is completely legal and acceptable to train your own service dog, which I did. And in this case, my autism service dog would be described as a red-nosed pit bull. There are breed bans, as they call them in various places, against pit bulls, but the thing that makes that quirky is that pit bull is not actually a breed. There's actually like half a dozen different breeds that get lumped into the category. Pit bull refers more to a combination of characteristics, the shape of the head and the shoulders, the musculature, and so forth. I got Bedivere when he was 8 weeks old, and he's the first dog I've ever had that started sitting on command at only 10 weeks. And I figured if he was that smart and that responsive, then he was up to the job. And so I trained him to become my autism service dog. And he has been on airplanes and traveled with me everywhere, restaurants and so forth, and has always just been an absolutely perfect service dog. He gets compliments everywhere we go. And at one point when I started riding motorcycles, I didn't want to choose between fuel economy and service dogs, so I found someone who would make a special kind of seat, and Bedivere rides with me on the motorcycle, and has been riding motorcycle for probably 3 or 4, probably almost 5 years now, that he's been riding with me on the motorcycle. And so a lot of people get a kick out of seeing us going down the highway with this pit bull wearing his own motorcycle goggles as we're zooming down at highway speeds, zooming down the highway. He took to it right the first time. I didn't really even have to train him to it. I just put him in the seat and buckled him in, and I rode up and down the street slowly and looked at him like, is everything okay? And he just looked at me like, what's the problem? And so we kept going, and he just took to it the first time. I don't know whether every other pit bull would behave the same way as Bedivere did. I got him when he was 8 weeks old. He started sitting on command at 10 weeks. And in consultation with my veterinarian, I had him neutered at 13 weeks to try to head off whatever unnecessary aggression there might otherwise be. The other reason, I guess, that I'm on the side of those who recommend spaying and neutering pets is just simply because there are literally thousands upon thousands that have to be euthanized every year because there's just too many. There aren't enough homes. And there are so many animals in shelters that need good homes, and so many of them are very worthy dogs. They're not all complete problems, but a lot of them have had difficulties. That in getting Bedivere as a puppy, I managed to circumvent a lot of that because the only experiences he's ever really had were with me, except for the first 8 weeks of his life. But as such, he and I have really grown on each other. He's He's remarkably well trained and remarkably responsive in all sorts of situations. He's my anchor everywhere we go, quite literally, because he's steady in all circumstances. Just like here, I told him come up on the bench, and he came up, and I said lie down, and he lied down, and here we are talking with you. Everywhere we go, though, people comment on what a beautiful dog he is, and what breed is he? Well, I don't know specifically what breed he is, but by description, he would be a red-nosed pit bull. But that's kind of like saying spaniel. It doesn't tell you which spaniel, or which hunting dog or which bird dog it is. There's a whole collection of characteristics. But it seems like where pit bulls developed a really bad reputation, to some extent, was when they became utilized by various gangs in urban environments, and by those who found that they're very strong and very dedicated dogs, and they will do anything to please their owners, and amazingly tough. There was one story I read of a pit bull that saved 2 children from an attack by a mountain lion. And a dog against a cat is usually not a fair fight, but in this case, the pit bull actually killed the mountain lion. Just amazing. But I am so emphatically opposed to any kind of dog fighting, but the point I was trying to make there is just that these are remarkably capable dogs, I think, but the only one I've really known is Bedivere. On the downside, I guess, long after he started working as my service dog, I was living in an apartment complex at one point, and he was actually attacked by a very poorly trained, if trained at all, Rottweiler mix. And it ran up and grabbed his face, and I guess being too much of a gentleman, he let the female Rottweiler, have the first bite, and she wouldn't let go, and there was blood all over the place, and he was growling. He was never afraid, and because he will always stand his ground. But we finally managed to get the dogs apart, and unfortunately the dog was owned by a former law enforcement officer. It was in a small town, so the dog was owned by an ex-cop who was friends with the city attorney and the municipal judge, and the whole thing was so not addressed that it could happen again tomorrow. It's a very dangerous dog owned by a very irresponsible person, and it demonstrated that. And I guess with pit bulls or with any dog, that's really what it comes down to. It's kind of amazing how the dog reflects its owner in so many ways. That if the owner is not disciplined and civil and respectful of others and so on, the dog takes on those same qualities. And the dog that is not adequately trained winds up being the equivalent of a juvenile delinquent, essentially a human being who has not had good parenting. A dog without good training is more or less equivalent to a youth without good parenting. They get into all kinds of trouble. They can hurt others. They can hurt themselves. All manner of bad things can happen. It's not about the breed of the dog or the race of the youth. It's about the good parenting and the good training. And all the pit bulls I've met, I find, and I've talked with other pit bull owners too, and they agree, they want to be with their people all the time, which theoretically would make pit bulls an ideal service dog, because service dogs have to be with their handlers all the time. They're not. Bedivere would not do well if I had to leave him alone 8 hours a day while I was at the office. He needs more human companionship than that. But by providing the human companionship to him, he provides the anchor for me, and we have a very symbiotic relationship that makes living with autism for me infinitely more manageable. So many more situations that I can deal with that otherwise I would probably become agoraphobic and stay home and do my TV shows and write my newsletters and just not deal with the world, because it is just too overwhelming and too adversarial and in many ways too unintelligent and too ignorant. In some cases, the ignorant is because people don't know, and in some cases, it's because they don't want to do the work of learning. In going back to that basic problem, though, of if you have a pit bull that you're not training and you're not providing any sort of human companionship, and they're dealing with so much separation anxiety, they're going to act out the same way a teenager without adequate parenting would act out. And so in a sense, the kids who don't have adequate parenting or don't have adequate guidance don't have something that they need, and so consequently go running to gangs to provide the emotional needs and the emotional support that families are ideally supposed to provide, and the guidance that the adult world is supposed to provide, and the support, and when they feel overwhelmed, that there's someone there who will help, and someone who doesn't expect them to just raise themselves. And dogs who are not looking to just raise themselves, they want guidance and they want good parenting and they want to know that they're loved. So in a sense, having pit bulls used by gangs, the pit bulls get a bad reputation, and it's erroneously assumed that it's because they're pit bulls, not because they're missing on their training and their parenting. And the kids who act out are erroneously assuming that it's because of their economic status or their racial classification or something like that, instead of just recognizing these kids aren't getting what they're needing. And that's why they're winding up in these other behaviors that nobody, really not even they, want to be in. But it becomes a self-perpetuating problem where once you develop a bad habit, it's that much harder to break it. And once you allow someone to go down a path of having to meet their own emotional needs in all the wrong ways, that how do they stop doing that and begin to meet their emotional needs in genuinely effective, healthy ways? And how do they begin to discover their own marvelous potential to be so much more than just a kid or just a dog or just a cat or just a person, to be an exceptional, loving, intelligent, socially conscious person. But that takes an investment of somebody's time and energy. The wonderful thing about that is I have never had to regret for 1 second any of the time that I invested in helping Bedivere to be the best dog that he could possibly be. There is no regret in that. I never hear parents talk with regret about the time that they spent with their children, helping them to grow up in an emotionally and psychologically and socially healthy way. It takes time, it takes investment, it takes commitment, but we're all winners for it. It's the investment that's worth doing. But we don't need laws that ban pit bulls any more than we need laws that ban teenagers. What we need is a society that values them from day one so that they become the best they can be, instead of the unparented juvenile delinquent that they could also very easily become. It's not the identity, it's the behavior, and it's all of us working together to make better behaviors happen and to make better community happen. I was talking with someone just the other day, and I said, why is it that in the past there was so much concern for having healthy communities, but you really don't hear much about that anymore? And in reflecting upon that, I'm sure there are 1,000 different possible reasons, but the ones that come most immediately to my mind is that we have evolved into a society that is so mobile. We don't know our neighbors and we don't know our communities as much as we once did. We have online communities now where it's text on a screen, and we don't know how old the person is, we don't know what race they are, we don't know what they look like, we don't know what they're wearing today, we don't know so many things. We're complete strangers to each other, and you cannot build a healthy community out of being complete strangers to each other. Somehow our online communications need to augment our face-to-face communications. When people would rather talk online than hear each other's voice, something is seriously wrong, and it doesn't bode well for our mental health. I use my email as another form of a telephone line, that I want to meet these people in person. I want to be there when they need me, if they need help moving from one apartment to another, if they need help dealing with yard work, if I need help with something and they need to be needed, and they appreciate that I need them, that it gives their life a sense of purpose, that we can each give each other a sense of purpose in life, and we can form this kind of symbiotic relationship where we're each better because of having our symbiotic relationship, because of having our friendship, that we're better than we could ever be on our own. Better together than trying to do it all on our own. And there are certain challenges in life, be it divorce or the loss of a loved one or a friend committing suicide, whatever it is, there are certain challenges that are so mentally and emotionally straining that no one should be expected to handle them all on their own. There's a big debate going on at the present time because I don't even know what the proper term for it is, but gun violence or school shootings, but it could happen anywhere. People who have gotten pushed to some extreme emotionally and mentally that they just explode with violence, and a whole lot of people get killed in the process. And some people want to say, well, that means there should be no guns. Well, before you even get to a discussion of whether there should be guns or not, or within what circumstances there should be guns or not, or who should have guns or not, before all of that, we have the basic fundamental issues of societal mental health that are still being horribly, abysmally unaddressed. When someone, long before someone ever picks up a gun, they are a person with mental and emotional needs. They are a person who needs to feel loved, who needs to feel that they have a positive future that is really possible, that they have viable alternatives to get their needs met. And to the extent that society ignores those and does not provide viable alternatives, in a sense, society shoves these people toward explosions of violence. I remember still like it was yesterday, working as a temporary office worker within an office building on the day that the Columbine school shootings happened in Colorado. And I remember everybody in the office being huddled over the radio, as I was the only person who was still alphabetizing the papers and doing the filing and organizing this and doing that. And my only question to them was, did you actually expect it not to happen at some point? As long as these fundamental problems are not addressed, it would be ridiculous to think that it's not going to explode at some point. It's one more wake-up call. And with each horrible, tragic shooting, it's one more wake-up call that we need to respond to each other's emotional and mental needs before they reach the point of exploding. If there is anything that is truly killing humanity or the world, at least the United States at this point, I would say it is the epidemic of narcissism, that we're not taking care of each other. And we don't have to go to a totalitarian socialism to do that. There are plenty of variations between the two ends of the spectrum, varying degrees of democratic socialism, where we pay attention to what's going on and we decide as a society how this will be managed and addressed, how we will keep mental health problems at a manageable low instead of allowing them to build to the point of explosion. We have so many colleges and universities in this country. Surely, if we put our heads together, we can come up with a balanced, integrated way of satisfying all concerns so that there is enough freedom and enough awareness and enough mental health that we don't have to have people exploding emotionally and psychologically. To the extent that it's all narcissistic, that when I say narcissism, I'm not referring to clinical narcissism that is so extreme. I'm referring to the narcissism that says, it's only about me, the world revolves around me, only what matters is me, my paycheck matters, my happiness matters. If somebody else isn't happy, they need to deal with that on their own. Well, some of the things that are making those other people unhappy are things that can only be collectively addressed. If it's taking all of us to create a traffic jam, it's going to take all of us to undo the traffic jam. If it's taking all of us to create levels of air pollution and toxicity that have people coming down with cancer every day, it's going to take all of us working collectively to bring those levels back down, to clean up our mess, to make our environments healthy again. To not expect people to be walking down the street with their mace can out because they're afraid of being mugged everywhere they go, but to instead create a world in which people have viable alternatives that are effective, because of which they don't have as many unmet needs, they don't need to resort to crime, they don't need to escape from reality, because lo and behold, reality is a friendly and wonderful place where people care about each other. And if your car breaks down, somebody will stop and help. And if you do stop to help someone, it won't turn out to be some kind of trap where they're just trying to get people to stop so that they can rob them. I don't believe there is any such thing as an uncaused effect. So if there is something negative going on in society, if there is crime, if there is somebody resorting to drugs, there's something behind that. And to simply say, well, I don't know what it is, and race ahead as if it doesn't matter, is totally irresponsible. As soon as you have two people, there's going to have to be some sort of societal agreement. Socialism simply says society cares about what its individuals are living with. We can take it to the extreme of totalitarian government where somebody up there is dictating everything that's going on, or we can get involved in running our own country and have democratic socialism where decisions are made collectively, that I talk to you and you talk to me and we both identify what we need, and out of that we decide how we're going to do it. That is democratic socialism in practice. And I understand that during the Cold War years, which covered the first half of my life, during the Cold War years, there was a lot of suspicion of socialism, but I don't think anybody really knew what socialism was. And we kept pointing fingers at totalitarian socialist governments in other countries, insisting that we don't want to be like them. Well, we don't have to be like them. We can write our own ticket. We can write it the way we want it to be. We can take what we learned by observing them and do it differently. And so I guess this is saying that, yes, Sister Who is a democratic socialist, but I don't know that that really pans out either, because I'm an independent thinker. And there are ways that capitalism is not bad, but unbridled capitalism kind of fuels into that same sort of, well, the basic idea that all extremes are bad. Capitalism taken to an extreme is bad. Socialism taken to an extreme is bad. Communism taken to an extreme is bad. Anything taken to an extreme is bad. The world is a diverse and integrated place. And I'm not campaigning for any particular political perspective, because I'm sure there are people watching this that have every political perspective I could name and more. The point is that we look at the effects of our actions, that we get involved in making systems that work no matter what label we put on them. That we remember the one thing that makes every system work, capitalism, socialism, communism, all of them, any of them could work. The only thing you need to insist upon to make any system work is love one another. If you love one another, capitalism will work, socialism will work, communism will work, everything will work, as long as love goes first. As long as love goes first. There's an oft-quoted and I'm blanking on the person who said it, but it was that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The one exception to that is the power of love. And if the power of love goes first, all the other powers are brought into harmony, so that it doesn't matter whether you have socialism or capitalism or communism or a resource-based economy or whatever. None of it matters as long as love goes first. And when it comes to pit bulls, it doesn't matter what breed a dog is. It doesn't matter how you try to keep everybody safe. As long as love goes first, everything else will fall into place. If love is absent, problems will follow. Every time, every situation. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that I've said some things that are helpful to you.